If you told me Middle-earth came in a box, I wouldn't believe you. Then this showed up. I spent the next 15 minutes organizing all 49 bags because I thought it would make me feel in control for something like this. I could not have been more wrong. 3 instruction books, 2 sticker sheets, all it takes to rebuild one of the greatest stories ever told. Our friend Frodo is first out of the box, and I can resonate with his expression. This build is intimidating. Next up, it was time to lay the foundation, and there's not much yet, but it's a start. These stairs showed up early, and you can tell we're in for lots of detail. We had to build a hidey hole for Samwise, even though he's equipped with a frying pan. Safety first when it comes to running away from the undead. We do need a place to relax and unwind, so building this bed made sense, and as a bonus, it ties the room together. Our little nook wouldn't be complete without a bookcase, of course. You have to keep yourself busy when you're tucked away in the middle of a forest. I think we can all agree surrounding the outside of your house with statues in a half-circle formation is the mark of good taste. Now, I am a person of taste, but yeah, these actually do look cool. Spoiler alert, we've got the Fall of Sauron now available as a sticker. I lined it up as straight as I could. It felt well-deserved. It also seems like if you destroyed the most evil being in the land, you should at least dress it up just a bit. At this part of the build, I wasn't quite sure what I was putting together, some sort of angel. It did look nice, but I decided to just trust the process. But it did come together quickly when I put these stickers on this bed that we were building a bedroom setup with nice candles and a fancy headboard. And even though I have zero experience in advanced elven architecture, I can say that these look very nice. These tiny pieces did not want to line up, so I brought out the LEGO tool to help out, and after some convincing, they snapped into place. The frame held up nicely, and it looked great. This book took longer to put together than it should have, and then there were the stickers, one for the cover, one for the page inside. On it were 4 simple words, there and back again. That's all it needed, a quiet journey that meant everything. I placed it on the desk with the writing supplies, and suddenly the room wasn't just decorated, it had purpose and started to make a lot of sense. And that's when Bilbo appeared. He brought a stick, and he seems pleased. At this point, I added additional furniture to the room just to tie everything together, make it feel lived in, and just like everything belongs exactly where it should be. And of course, we can't forget about the exterior, so I added some additional details, just enough to dress it up, but we don't want to overdo it or anything like that. And stepping back for a second, it was starting to resemble something finished, but we still had a very long way to go. When you're building a house, you have to place shingles on top of the roof, and we all like to go for realism when we're putting together an elven building. So I placed what seemed to be hundreds of little pieces on top by hand, like I had something to prove. I didn't, but it looked good. And that's all that matters when you're putting together a fantasy land, because it needs to look just right. And I built some kind of creature for the rooftop. It could be a bird, it might be a gargoyle, either way, it's watching and no doubt, certainly judging. I tucked a few windows in near the roofline. They fit in just perfectly, which matches my expert building abilities. It's like it was meant to be. These curvy green pieces were very satisfying, and they gave the build some height, which I didn't know it needed. The final tower piece was rather delicate and took a minute to get it right, but as soon as we locked everything in, the tower felt finished, and this was the first moment that we had of satisfaction. But it's back to work with the book too. I started framing out the next section, just plates and bricks for now, but it's already got structure to it, and we can tell that we're in for even more detail here. And it was time to drop in a water base, which is broad, flat, and kind of calming. And then these nifty waterfalls, which are stacked like motion, frozen midair. There's also a frog, and I didn't ask why, he just lives here now. It was time to round out the landscape with slopes, stairs, and textures. It finally felt grounded. Inside we have a weaponry table which probably has a name, but it does have a little turning piece, maybe for making something precise. Hard to tell, still satisfying. And then I built the forge outside, nothing too fancy, just a few bricks stacked around a flame, but you know, it gets the point across. And I framed in the doorway with fire on both sides. It's subtle, but it does pull you in. And there's even more terrain that we needed to add here, some roots breaking through the edge, like the trees have been here longer than the walls. And where there's water, there's a bridge, which has clean angles, a few careful steps. It doesn't really feel modern, but it does feel walked on. And since we're in the forest, we of course need to build some trees, which did take some time. The branches are fragile, the leaves could be a little stubborn, but once they're in place, it all changes. The whole build feels older, like it's been standing in the shade for many years. And that's the exact vibe that you want when you're putting together a secret forest that has details everywhere you look. I didn't know what this was going to be, kind of a weird shape, but it came together fast, click after click. Every piece felt like it had a reason. And I still wasn't sure what it was leading to, but whatever it was, it felt centered, intentional. It's funny how LEGO can do that, give you something that feels complete before you even know what it is. It kept getting more detailed until it started to feel like something sacred, maybe a place to quietly overthink things. Everything was curved, balanced, measured, like someone designed it to hold silence, and probably a really expensive chair. I didn't build it fast, I don't think you're supposed to, and this part made me slow down, not because it was hard, but I think because it earned that pause. And no expensive chair, but instead a small bed, secluded and peaceful. And then it was time to set the whole thing into the landscape as if someone was meant to rest here. It's time for book 3 and I ran out of space, so let's go ahead and take care of that. The manual wanted 2 tan base plates, and I had a tan one and a brown one and a sinking feeling. Turns out I built half of Rivendell on the wrong floor. So I did what any sane person would do. I extracted the base plate like surgery and swapped it out. Our forge has been downgraded, but at least we can do the right thing now. And by that, I mean placing dozens of these decorative tiles, which look rather expensive. Added a few tables, scattered some candles, nothing fancy, just enough to make the room feel used, like it's waiting for someone to sit down and stay a while. Next, it was time to add some maps, which are just stickers, but they're packed with a lot of detail. One shows a wider world, and the other a journey that should be taken relatively soon. They're small, but they have a lot of weight, like this place remembers things. This candle was fancier than expected, and I'm assuming that Rivendell had a pretty solid LEGO budget. And apparently Sauron lives underneath the floor. I didn't write the lore, I'm just following instructions. I stacked in some arches and walls next, and the shape of the room finally started to show up. This mural tile was no joke. One wrong move and the whole panel is off-center forever. Took a steady hand and a little bargaining with gravity, but it was worth it. It feels like it actually belongs on a wall. Next up, a hanging banner with a simple shape and probably with a deep history. At least that's how it felt when I placed it. And then I locked in these inner arches, which felt clean, structured, and surprisingly smooth to snap together. And I stepped back to look at the work so far. The tiles, the arches, the banners, everything was starting to speak the same language and come together very well. I built a short stairway next with some gold trim. It's subtle, but it draws the eye. And then I connected the smaller section to the main room. It slid in so naturally that it didn't feel like a new piece. It was time to build what looks like a fancy telescope. Either way, it clearly serves a purpose, even though I have no idea what this is. And then I layered in some more arches and more walls. The framework kept getting tighter, but still felt pretty airy. This part brought everything to a halt. Dozens of tiny curves weaving through archways and narrow pieces. I had to press each one in just right, too much force, and the whole thing bends. It felt overly delicate, like decorating with porcelain. But once it was in, it was pure elven overkill. And honestly, kinda perfect. It was now time to finish the roof with some elegant detailing, classic elf stuff. Everything was put into place like it's been waiting its whole life for this moment, and honestly, kinda satisfying. I added 2 mural tiles here. One shows a fantasy city, the other a ship at sea. They're printed on tiny tiles, but they look like pages out of a history book. The elves must have had a great arts budget because these look better than anything in my house. I framed them into the wall like little windows to a world that's long gone, but somehow still here. And this guy returned, still watching, still judging. I started another roof with what seemed like hundreds of tiny tiles yet again. I placed each one by hand for an hour and a half, and I could have made dinner, I could have called a friend, maybe touched some grass. But I kept going, because the rhythm of it started to feel weirdly calming. And in the end, it looked like a roof, so I guess it was worth it. And it was time to lift the finished roof onto the build. It lined up clean with no gaps and no struggle. I've had pieces fight with me all week, but this one dropped in like it was ready for it. That part always feels good. This round base started off simple, just some curves and a few hinge plates, but the more I added, the more it felt deliberate. First came the platform and then these pillars. I wasn't quite sure what this would be used for. Either way, it felt sacred. And bit by bit, everything started to come together and stopped looking like a Lego build. It started looking like somewhere quiet. And yes, the tiles have returned. Different roof, same story. Tiny pieces carefully angled, all for a patch of color, but it does turn out very, very nicely. I placed it right onto the structure and everything aligned, which is not bad for something built on very little sleep. This tree was one of my favorite builds. It's packed with layered greenery and a hidden branch structure underneath. I don't know how it looks that natural, but somehow it just does. And I added another small tree with significantly fewer pieces. It still worked. It was time to start laying out another round base, and at first it just looked like a disc, but the shaping had a weird elegance to it. Each layer locked in with its smooth rhythm, no forcing, no adjusting. Symmetrical, minimal, and kind of addictive to hold. It's not trying to be anything flashy, but it still feels important. Next I had to layer tiles onto the round base, which was going surprisingly smooth. And then I dropped this weird jagged table right in the middle. I don't know, it kind of looked like something people would want to gather around. Perhaps a fellowship. And then it was time to build a bunch of identical pieces over and over with no idea what they were for. Just the same shape again and again like a test I didn't study for. But then instantly it made sense. These are obviously chairs. So of course it made sense to place these around that jagged table for everyone to gather around. And this is another moment where everything felt just right. This tree had a real presence, something about the way the branches climbed felt intentional. And the leaves didn't need much adjusting, they just worked. LEGO greenery always surprises me. Even when I know what it's going to be, it still clicks into place like magic. And of course, right near the end, I realized I was one piece short. I searched everywhere, gave up, found a spare piece from another build, and just moved on. I used that off-color piece to finish this throne, which is a bit of a cheat, I suppose, but the build still ended up looking great. I can confidently say that this is now a custom Rivendell that nobody else has ever built. As we take a moment to admire the minifigures, I would like to thank my Patreon members for making this channel possible. You know, these minifigures aren't just characters from a box. They're more like echoes of a story that's been retold for decades, a world that never really left us. And there's something comforting about seeing them all together again like nothing has changed. And if Rivendell taught me anything, it's that peace is something you build carefully, one piece at a time, Also, maybe don't start a build with 49 numbered bags unless you've had lunch first. And this is where I set the console in place and decided that the build was indeed perfect.